All right, good evening and welcome to what has provisionally been called Tuohy and Stewie, but we are just spitballing about potentially leaving the name up to the fans to decide. But before that, Stewie, how are you?
Well, mate, I mean, not perfect, but I'm going well. The sun's shining. We're looking at Brandon Parfitt out here with his shirt off, kicking the footy around, having a good time. So, going well. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. We do obviously record this at GMHBA. We're up in one of the boxes, and yeah, that is a lovely sight. Brandon Parfitt kicking goals with no top on by himself.
Sorry, no, there's a curator out there.
There is a curator out there rolling the grass as well.
Yes.
Stewie, we'll get into footy. The idea of this is just more or less me and you having kind of the chats we often have over a coffee or in the car on the way to and from games. We're going to have lots of guests because of some scheduling issues and how interesting the conversation was. We've already had Finchy on.
Yeah, pre-recorded.
Pre-recorded. That will be coming later in the show. We could have gone for an hour easy. That was outstanding. There's a lot of overlap.
There was.
Between what he thinks and acts and how we...
Yeah, fascinating chat. We were about 45, 50 minutes into it, and we just immersed ourselves in that conversation, and very, very special chat. And I mean, honestly, we probably could have talked for another 45, I think, and we very may well get him back because he was that impressive. It's
no secret why some people are successful when you hear them talk about their process and how much effort and work they put in, but that's all coming later on in the show. I think you're really going to enjoy it. First things first, welcome back. You had a little injury early in the season, got back exceptionally quick. Yeah. What was the rehab process like? Because you knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, it was interesting. I remember as soon as it happened, I was quite dejected. Obviously, 15 minutes into round one, you never want to get an injury. But as soon as the medical staff cleared me of some significant injuries that I was quite stressed about, I was quite bullish about my recovery time. And then spent the night with Pat. We actually bunkered up together in Melbourne before I had to go get my scan. And he had done a medial before, and he was extremely positive, which gave me a great insight into sort of how he approached his and how quickly he got back. So once the diagnosis was there, it was, let it heal as much as we possibly could and then push the mark with how quickly I could get back. I did have a target on Easter Monday, but all things considered, I felt extremely well very quickly. So, it's why we play, is to play, not to be on the sidelines. And, you push yourself. Everyone at different times in their career plays with injuries, and I'm no different. So it was good to be back out playing, but obviously a poor result by the team.
Yeah, it was. It hasn't been the ideal start. We've enough runs on the board and we've faced adversity enough to know we'll respond. But it's funny, isn't it? I always think with injuries, so I'm a big soccer fan, big Liverpool fan. You like it as well, NFL, NBA and stuff.
Yep.
It's easy to get caught up in only seeing the 2 hours on the weekend that players play and not maybe realising that there's a whole kind of person behind it. Injuries can have a huge impact on kind of who your identity and how you feel as a player. 100%. And people only see, he played well this week or played crappy this week. Yep. Like, that's all they see. How did you find, like, this was obviously a shorter injury. I've been pretty good with injuries, but I have had a dodgy knee a couple of years back.
Yep.
I really struggled for those longer extended periods on the sideline.
Yep.
How have you found it? Because you have had a couple of little niggles over the journey.
Yeah, I think you learn a little bit more about yourself in those lonely moments. As you said, the greater sporting world now gets a bit more information regarding what athletes actually go through. It used to just be, the 2 hours, as you said, that you see game day or whatever it is for each individual sport. But the data and the exposure that we sort of allow ourselves to give now is quite good, I think. It allows you to sort of see, as you said, see the person behind the player. Your process, I think, changes regarding your injury. Like, I had a season-ending injury. I had a collarbone. I've broken my skull. I've had some interesting ones over the journey, but they've never really been ones that have had a strict timeline to get back. They've always sort of been open to interpretation and how I'm feeling. So, whereas with yours was a bit more managed throughout the year, and people probably didn't understand the extent of the injury that you had through 2020. I remember sitting up on the Gold Coast and seeing one of our old doctors, Drew Slimmon, drain your knee and take about 30 mil of fluid out. And it's just like, some people don't quite grasp what we actually put ourselves through and why the off-season is so important for us to just recover.
Yeah.
And the difficulties that the game actually entails. It's a brutal sport.
It is. It's relentless as well. And, you know, like, we'll get on to maybe how imperfect the year feels like it's been for us to this point, but it hurts players a lot. Like, losing games hurts. Not playing hurts. And one of the reasons players play so often with injuries, and that 2020 year for me was, I hurt my knee at the end of 2018 when we lost to Melbourne in that final.
Yep.
I could barely walk back up the ramp at the MCG. It's on a slight incline. My knee was a little bit sore pre-game. I couldn't get up the race. I managed to kick a goal in the second half of that, and if you watch me jogging back to position post that, I could jog in a straight line, but the second I tried to turn, my knee was buckling.
Yep.
That came back in 2020, and I started, draining it. And one of the reasons you play with injury is because we're so invested in each other. Like, we do love the club. Like, we're desperate to win. We're not happy when we don't. I find it hard not to play because no matter how much evidence in front of me that I'm injured and I shouldn't play, it's hard for me not to feel like I'm letting blokes down.
Oh, yeah,
like,
100%.
it's really hard for me to sit on the sideline and, like, watch you charge back with the flight and get smashed and sit there and go, oh, like, yeah, well done. Like, it's hard not to think, I should be out there trying to help, which is why players play with injuries, and it's why form can dip, and you see it across the league. Every player at every club has played with injury at some stage. But it's because we've got high standards and we want to win. Yeah,
exactly. And the emotional investment as well, like the time that you spend with each other, you do have that emotional investment where you do want to, for lack of a better term, go to war with these blokes. Like, yes, you sort of all come from different backgrounds, and we're lucky enough to be at the Geelong Footy Club, but you spend so much time together. Like, in most days, you see blokes, you build massive relationships. And you do want to go out there and obviously put on a show for the fans, but you do it for the blokes right next to you. And that's what I love about football, especially at the elite level. Everyone's got a story to tell. Everyone comes from a specific background, but you're all wearing the same colour, trying to implement a game plan. And it's the best thing you can do, in my eyes. Like, I love the game of footy like that, and how it creates that opportunity.
You hear a lot of ex-players talking about the thing they miss most is sitting down post-win in the rooms, in the sheds afterwards, because it does feel like you've really achieved something
100%.
When you've won, and you're equally devastated when you lose. I reckon, so we're really lucky, right? We came to a club that is just constantly competing every year. The further you get without winning it, and the more you lose big games, like, the harder I take losses, personally.
Yep.
So to have gone through 4 or 5 years of, I don't know how many prelims, we just fell short, and with Granny in 2020, the 2021 prelim was a really hard one to swallow. To finally get over the line last year then, it just kind of feels like such a long journey, especially post-COVID. It's just all been worth it. And hopefully the fans kind of realise that while you would have all been devastated for every loss we've had over the journey, I hope they're proud of the fact that we keep backing it up and going again. And this little period feels like a little mini one of those dips. And I'm not too worried. I think our fans are pretty steadfast in their support for us, so I'm not too worried. But just trust us when we say that this isn't something we're taking lightly, or it's going to turn for us. Just like it did post 2021, and just like it did after every other hard loss we've ever had.
I think the flippant terms of complacency and are they happy with themselves, like, it couldn't be further from the truth. Like, some of the things that we saw in the off season with the young boys coming back and the drive and the blokes getting in and out of here, I don't think there is any sense of complacency. Like, we've had such a fantastic journey, as you said, throughout, getting to the line, falling the last hurdle, perennial contenders that never got the job done. The satisfaction of winning the premiership last year almost added an extra layer to why we do it, because it actually proved that everything that we invest and everything that we put into the game was worth it. So I don't think that the fans should be too disheartened with the fact that we're 0-3. Like, the game is as tough as it's ever been. The league is so even in terms of not only the players that are playing, like, there's some seriously special talent out there, but the AFL's objective is to make it as even as possible.
Is to not allow what Geelong have done for 15 years.
Been the one outlier in terms of consistently performing at a high level. And yes, we are so disappointed that right now we sit 0-3, but we're so bullish on the fact that we will bounce back because we have proven that. It's not like we'll bottom out and we'll turn up our toes and say it's too hard because it's just not in our DNA. Individually and collectively with this group, I have no issues with the attitude of this group.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It feels a little bit like there was stages last year when you could see the change coming, but it wasn't quite happening for us.
Yeah.
The Freo game out here last year for me was a point where I left so frustrated and thinking maybe we can't win it. And then within a week or two, the signs were really strong. And then for me, it was the Port Adelaide game in Adelaide. We didn't have you on the side, which is obviously a huge loss. We dominated the second quarter. They came back and kicked 1 million goals unanswered in the third quarter with the Adelaide crowd, and we just found a way of getting over the line. That, to me, I walked off the ground. There's a photo of me and Danger walking off the ground, and I remember what we were talking about, and we literally looked at each other and said, we're going to win it this year. That, for me, was when it was like, it's not even up for debate anymore. We're the best team in the league. And I don't know how many people would have agreed with me at that stage. We also started last year 5-4. Like, it's a long season.
Yeah, it is.
Such a long season.
It is. And I think that we alluded to this pre-recording this. Like, none of this is any excuse as to why we're on 3. We do not accept this at all. We are not ones that are like, oh, we'll be right and, be a bit blasé about it. Like, we are going to work. Like, we're ready to get in. Easter Monday, Hawthorn, huge game. Like, this is not a line in the sand moment, but this is an opportunity to really find our identity again. And I think that's really exciting for us as a group.
Yeah, no, I agree. All positive on our end. There's a little taste of, that was a little rabbit hole. I didn't really mean for it to turn into that.
But got a bit good. I
like
that. That was nice. That's
well,
a good start. Episode 1, that was
like we're
very
driving
good.
To Melbourne.
True.
We're driving
to a game, me and you. Yep. Yeah. Just no quizzes yet.
Yeah. Speaking of, we did talk pre-recording about opening up some questions.
Yep.
I don't know exactly how we're going to format it. Send questions to
socials at geelongcats.com
/Big Reggie or something.
Oh yeah, send your best questions to at Zach2E.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure he will appreciate them all. Not me though.
All right, there you go. That's a taste of what this is going to be like. We do have Finchy coming up later on in the show. Stay tuned for that. Give us some feedback.
Yep. What do you want from us? What do you want to hear? Little insights, behind the scenes stuff. What are you, the fans, interested in? Because that's what we want to get out of this is give you guys a little taste into who we are outside of on the playing arena, but also, the things that go on behind the scenes and the personalities and the people we have in this fantastic football club. So coming up next is our first guest, Aaron Finch, retired last September from ODIs and T20s in Feb, captain of the Australian team, out-and-out superstar, a really, really insightful chat that we had a lot of fun doing. So coming up next, Aaron Finch. Righto, welcome back. Our first guest, Aaron Finch, retired from ODIs last September.
Yep.
T20s in Feb, still going though on the Masters Tour overseas.
I'm still playing a few T20 comps, so I'll play in the Big Bash again this year, and there's a new American league that's starting up, so I'll play in them too. Maybe dip into a couple more Legends type retired guys leagues, and
be like Bernard Langer. You'll be playing until you're 70.
Basically, yeah. There's quite a few guys that are on them tours now that are mid to late 40s. So the first one that I played was in Qatar recently, and I felt a little bit awkward having just retired and just played Big Bash. And then guys like Misbar Huck, who's 49,
oh wow,
and he comes out and he's peeling off runs, and you're like, Jesus, we've got to try and keep up with this bloke.
How big are the ovals in these Masters tournaments? Are they regulation size? Have they brought them in a bit, or
no? They're regulation. So in the Legends League cricket, which was based in Doha this year, it's out of India, as most of the T20 comps are, but it was based in Doha. There's only one cricket ground there, so. It was regulation size. They had to do a lot of work to it to get it to a professional level because they used it as a big fan park throughout the World Cup. So it's got maybe 15,000 seats, and they had a huge screen running right down the middle of the wicket. So they had to take a bit of time to get it back up and running.
It must be nice playing. I'm assuming it's not the same performance anxiety going into one of these games as it was during your career. Do you miss the performance anxiety, or is it still early enough post-career for you to just be enjoying?
Well, the first game I was incredibly nervous, and I got out there to bat, and we're playing against the Indian team, and I was 1 off 10 balls, I think, and I'm just coming out of playing, and I'm like, Jesus, how embarrassing is this? I've come from my best ever year of Big Bash to playing Legends cricket, and then all of a sudden I'm 1 off 10, and I luckily got away and got a few runs, but I was incredibly nervous because I was like, the expectation on me as a just retired player is probably a lot more than some of these older guys. So it was good fun though. It's great fun. Towards the end of my career, I knew that I was done playing for Australia because that wasn't the same amount of, like you said, performance anxiety, nerves. When you walk out and mark centre, in my early days, you're shitting yourself and your legs are shaking a bit. And I was getting none of that towards the end of my career. So that was a really good sign to me that it was time to pass the baton on.
Circling back, so obviously recently retired, 8,500 runs, test matches, 150 odd ODIs for Australia, 2-time captain winning World Cup.
One captain, 2-time World Cup.
Oh, 2 times, so 1 time as captain. So
Yes.
21 captain?
Yes.
15 just a player?
Yes.
Still an amazing achievement.
Yeah, it was great.
So circling right back, you obviously a local boy, Colac, having spent a few months out of the game now, what's it like to reflect on that and really take a bit of stock on how incredible your career internationally and domestically was?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because as any sportsman would know that when you're in your career, when you're playing and you're in the grind and you play, you travel, you never get time to sit down and reflect and go, geez, that was really cool. So the only other time that I had that in my career was after the 2015 World Cup. I think I jumped on a plane 4 or 5 days later to India to the IPL. 4 games in, I snapped my hamstring tendon. So I've come back to have surgery, but that gave me 8 weeks on the sideline to be able to actually soak it up and appreciate what we'd achieved. Having retired now fully from international cricket, I think that there's a part of me that you don't want to let it go because you think it's going to last forever when you're playing, and particularly when things are going well, you sort of push. I certainly push study and anything else to the side because you think you're not going to need it. I'm just going to play forever. This is a life. And then when you go through down patches, you're like, Jesus, what can I do to get out of this? And then you find that you've got no avenue away from the game at times because you're so engrossed in it. But now, with all of that gone, you just see, I've got a bit of memorabilia. It's not up at home. It's just in the garage at the moment since we've moved down here. But it's really cool to see some of that stuff and you go, geez, to have Virat Kohli's shirt that you played against him in this series, that the first series that Australia won in India for, I think it was 15 years in ODI cricket, to have Kane Williamson's shirt, who's a great of the game, to sit down and see some memorabilia of teams that you played in and things that you achieved. It's really cool. And I probably don't do it enough because with a little one at home, life goes on pretty quick, and as you guys would know, there's no time to sit around and pat yourself on the back when mum's running around after a toddler.
Yes. Would you change that if you could? Because I don't know if you're the same, Stewie. The later in my career I get, the more philosophical I get about how lucky I've been, especially given I grew up somewhere that didn't even play the sport, and now I'm kind of 13 or 14 years in. It's nice to smell the roses every now and then. If you could go back, would you somehow like to coach your younger self to maybe just soak it in, or do you think the way you approached it was actually the best way? I sometimes would like to have just maybe just looked around the MCG on a big game instead of just being so insular and worrying about performance.
Yeah, I definitely would, and I think at the time you just want to get and play again. So you want to finish that and you win and you sit around, you have a few beers with the boys, and then everyone jets off, and then you'll go on to your next competition, or Australia will go on another tour. So you're just always in that game mindset. I would have loved to have been able to knock back a few things at the time and say, no, I'm not going to go and play that competition because, one, I want to mentally recharge because you just get into a grind and that wears you down a bit as well. But I also would have loved to have been able to sit back and go, right, what does my game need me to improve on, rather than trying to do it in international cricket, which is brutal because you get 3 or 4 days lead in and that's it. I would have loved to have improved my game, but also take a tour off or miss playing in a T20 comp to be able to sit down and go, geez, what we achieved there was really cool, and be able to appreciate it at the time with the memory still fresh, because as you know, the older you get, the better you get too. So like you can tend to overplay your importance in that role once you get a bit older too. But I wouldn't change it, but I wish that I took more time to appreciate what I was doing and what we were doing as a collective for Australia and for different domestic teams at the time.
It's brilliant. I found it really interesting, like you were talking about, how quickly, I suppose, cricket moves. Like you jump out of a tour for Australia and probably the IPL, and then obviously all these startup T20 leagues that happened. When you're in those, like those really fast-moving tours, do you ever just find yourself in a bit of like a flow state?
Yep.
Like where you're just like on to the next, next innings, next game.
Yep.
And sort of when you're in that moment as a cricketer, what's that like for you? Like where you just walk out, you were saying before, like, your performance anxiety, you walk out, you mark middle, your knees are trembling, all sort of things. As a very, novice cricket nuffy, like you walk out there from ball one, you're just into it. You don't feel your way into an innings. You've got so much confidence in your ability and the way you can sort of hit the ball. What's that like? What is that like to feel?
The older you get, the more you feel.
Yep.
And probably the more time it takes you, because you do start to, you can see the finish line and you know that you're probably only one tour away from the media calling for your head or the axe being sharpened behind you. So I think the older you get, the more insular you get at times, and you start focusing more on your own game rather than probably the impact that you can have on a game. So when you're young, you just go out there and you try and smack it, and that's when you have the most fun. That's when you probably have the most success as well, I think, because you're just freewheeling it. In terms of what you're talking about, like going from series to series, is the mindset that you get into is like, it's a grind. It's fun but the travel is the thing that kills you.
Yep.
Because for example, like an IPL game will be 8 o'clock start. So that goes through till about 10:30. By the time you leave the ground, it's 12. A lot of traffic around. So you get back to the hotel at 1. By the time you unwind, it's 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And then you just generally get into a state where you get back. So you can't sleep. So you just have a couple of beers with the boys, sleep at 3 or 4 o'clock, and you'll be up at 8 o'clock for a bus to the airport, and then you do the same thing again, and it just keeps going. So when you get back-to-back games in the same place, that is like absolute gold, because you can sleep in, you can do whatever you want. And I'm not a great afternoon sleeper, so that then it just becomes a process of play, travel, and you're tired the whole time. You're mentally tired. You would have just come off an Australian tour. And I think one thing that helped me a lot in the back part of my career was the captaincy, because you can't be insular. You can't just worry about yourself. You almost put your own game to one side to try and lead the team as best you can, and you have to put so much time and effort into the planning and preparation for every game that makes it a bit more fun. That gets you invested in it heavily for every game. Whereas I think the guys who play all three formats, that's just absolute brutal. And I think it's so unsustainable for a long period now to be able to go a 3-test series into 3 ODIs, 3 T20s, and then you pack up and go home for 2 days, see your family, and then you're off to a domestic tournament or another tour. So that's just brutal. And I think them guys at times use different formats of the game to just survive and just get through, rather than, I guess, like that's their recharge time, because you can't recharge in a test match. Like that's just, it's brutal. And the schedule is unsustainable, I think, for guys to continue playing 3 formats. But it can become a mental drain on you. And they're the times when you're tired and emotional, and then you start thinking about your family more, and you miss being at home, and then you're on FaceTime 10 times a day, and that's when I find it the toughest, because you're just away, and if there's any problems at home, there's nothing you can do. Like, I remember my wife had a health issue during COVID while I was in Dubai at the IPL, and she had to go in for surgery. I'm like, well, there's nothing I can do, because if I come home, I've got to do 2 weeks quarantine anyway, and you feel helpless, and you feel
tired.
Yeah, and you can't help. So like when you're interstate, you can jump on a flight and get home. When you're internationally, you're a day away at least, wherever you are. So that makes it really challenging at times. And I know my wife's been unbelievably supportive, but at times it wears her down as well, because she's got a toddler running around like a chook with a head cut off and with no respite while I'm playing cricket.
So I'm interested in the actual performance aspect of what you do. So we all play a little bit of golf. I'm more familiar with golf than cricket. It may not surprise you to hear. The one thing I find fascinating about, say, the top end golfers is the prospect of having time off between every shot freaks me out. We play football, and the second the game starts, it's just you're going till it finishes. I can't imagine what it's like to maybe feel like you're out form and then have to stand there for, you know, however many seconds until you face the next ball or walk to the 18th tee with a shot up. I'm interested in how you, because you would imagine that a lot of people kind of try and coach themselves to use that time to reset and go over the fundamentals again. But there must be at least a huge chunk of players who that time is torture. That is just thinking about the mistake you've made. I'm interested how you get over that when things aren't going maybe the way you'd like. Because for us, it's kind of, you don't really have time to think. Yeah. Which is a benefit for me. I wouldn't like time to think, to be honest.
Well, it's you have so many emotions that go through your mind, and I've had some really good peaks in my career, but I'll describe myself as a streaky player. I go through hot streaks and I go through cold streaks, and when I'm playing well, I think I was as good as anyone. But when I was going poorly, I was, particularly early in my career, I was rubbish at getting out of it because I actually didn't have many coping mechanisms for it. And when you're playing a series against the same team who've got the wood over you, or the same bowler who's got the wood over you, and as soon as you walk out to bat, they're bowling, regardless of what. I could go and bat at number 5 instead of open the batting, and I know when I play India, Bhuvaneshwar Kumar is going to bowl that next over because he gets me out for fun. So when you the mental torture that you go through planning for that as well, when you're out of form. When you're in form, it doesn't matter. You can train poorly, you can have a bad net session, you prep for the game, but you walk out in the middle and your mind is clear. When everything's not clicking, I tended to overtrain. So I would put so much time and effort into training and then not the mental side of it. So 2018, I'll give you a great example actually. I made my test debut. So I played 2 tests in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Come back straight into a one-day series against South Africa, and I got no runs there. And then straight into test matches against India. I think I got 150 in 3 tests. Dropped from the test team, back straight into ODIs, straight into T20s. Then we're over in India straight away. So there's literally been no more than 2 or 3 days break since it would have been July to get away and clear your head and try and escape the game. We had the World Cup coming up later in 2019 in the UK, and the press started calling for my head because I hadn't made any runs, and I had no escape from it, and I had no way to deal with it. And this is late in my career. Like, this is, you feel the walls starting to close in on you a little bit. And then I had a great conversation with Justin Langer, and he started talking me through what he did during his career. So I was waking up in the middle of the night, and all I could think about was Bhuvaneshwar Kumar hitting me on the front pad, and you're out. And that is as simple as I can put it. But I would wake up 2 or 3 times a night because I had no mental capability or strategy to deal with it. So I'd wake up tired, I'd go to bed tired, I'd go to training tired, I'd go to the game tired, and I wasn't giving myself the best chance. So what I did then, through these chats with Justin Langer, is he explained your mind's ability to switch off once you've come up with a solution for yourself. So literally all it was, and it's so basic, I would write down every Indian bowler, how they're trying to get me out, how I can cope with that, but how I can dominate them, how I can put so much pressure back on them that they fail. And it was literally, it'd be, some bowlers it'd be 3 or 4 lines, some it'd be 1. It'd be a part-time off spin. I'd say, right, every time he over pitches, I'll hit him for 6. And that was as clear as it had to be. But for Bhuvaneshwar Kumar, it was, right, I'm going to bat out of my crease, try and get the keeper to come up to the stumps because he's going to swing it into me, trying to hit my pad. And he'll occasionally swing it away, but that's more of a setup for a couple of balls later. So I did this, and the first night it was like that. I went to sleep, and I slept through, and I walked out to bat the next day, and my mind was clear because I'd allowed it to switch off, because I'd given my mind a solution to the problems. So it was able to go, right, you know what you're going to do, you're okay. And I think that game I got 30 or something, which was my best score for a few games, and but it was like a weight of pressure come off. And then next game I got 100, and then next game then I got 70. Went to Dubai to play Pakistan and got a couple of hundreds and a 90. So during that space of the next 2 weeks, that's what I mean. Like I was a streaky player. When I was on, I could score quite heavily. But just giving my mind the ability to switch off by the most simple task. And it was literally doing, like I'd do all this mental preparation in terms of how I'm going to face each bowler, but I'd never written it down. I've never been a writer. So, but once I started writing down, then I'd read it back to myself. That was it. That was like my mind was then clear and was able to switch off and give myself a better opportunity because it was clear.
So that's fascinating, because I actually talked to Scotty a little bit about this type of stuff. So post-loss, so I'm not sure exactly when this will go out, but we haven't had an ideal start to the season. We just lost to the Blues last week. And post-loss, I really struggle. I really struggled to sleep. I think a lot about the game, particularly if I've underperformed, which I did last week. Immediately after doing our review, I instantly feel better, because I tend to catastrophize a little bit in my mind. It's like, how could you have made that mistake? That's ridiculous. Like, and you watch it back and you kind of take everything into account, and all of a sudden your mind is clear. You can start sort of moving forward. I've tried writing down as well. It doesn't work quite as well for me, but what does work is just talking through really clearly what actually went wrong. Yeah. So this rings really true, because if I was playing, if for whatever reason every AFL team just decided reviews overrated, you just play the game and then you move on to the next week, there's something to be said for that on certain occasions. But my mind would run riot if I didn't get to sit down and look at actually what went wrong. Yeah. Because when you look at what went wrong, it's like, it's actually quite an easy fix. It's like, geez, to beat us, it felt like they were beating us with stoppages, and then they were running numbers out the front, and then like I was defending 4 guys in our D50. Like, how does that happen? All of a sudden you watch it and it's one little breakdown up the ground. Yeah. That like causes this domino effect. And all of a sudden it doesn't feel like your whole game plan's falling apart. It's just you got this one aspect wrong. Yeah. So that kind of rings true for me as well, and I've had to actively guard against not catastrophizing post-loss, because I do have a habit of doing that. And I'm also, I think, like most competitive sports people, highly, highly critical of myself, far more than I think anybody else is. So I don't know, it's probably... Yeah, you're highly critical of yourself as well, aren't you?
Yeah, very similar. Different lens as well. I feel as though like the difference in the sport, like we have 20 or 17 other blokes on the field with us that we have to sort of rely on for a system and the way that we want to play, and those minute breakdowns that, you know, all of a sudden ends up in our position. You 1v3 in F50 and they're out the front, and like, as you say, you catastrophize it, and you're like, how has this happened? Like, why?
It feels like it happens so
quick. Why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
Yep. And then, like, I suppose in cricket, I was actually had a question that sort of ties into this. I always found it interesting, the dynamic. Like, you're obviously playing an 11-person team sport, but you're also basically gunning for yourself, because individually you need to perform to stay in a team, which is similar for footy, but you do rely a lot more heavily on your teammates to help you out. So how did you find that dynamic initially, going from being a young player, a district player, into the international arena, and then, you know, being captain of an international team? How did that sort of work for you, and how did that sort of evolve as your career progressed?
I think I probably wasted 2 years of good development when I was... So my first rookie contract I got with Victoria was straight out of school. So I was 18. And to turn up to Victorian training with some legends of the sport, I felt as though I'd already made it. I got the tracksuit, like I've made it. So then you get comfortable. And then, so I had a 3-year rookie contract. In the 3rd year, I was like, shit, I haven't done anything for the last 2 years. Like, you try and tinker with your game and stuff. And at that stage, the head coach, like, we didn't have that many staff. So the head coach was the batting coach. And if he said, you should change your technique to do this, you go, okay. Yep. Because he's telling you, which means if I do it, I'm more chance of getting picked. Yep. And I probably wasted a couple of years there going, like, trying to impress the coach rather than sitting back and going, hang on, how does that affect the rest of my game? What are the flow-on effects if I change that? If I, like, a footwork pattern, you can change it slightly, but to overhaul it at 19, 20 years old, that's probably 15 years of pattern that you're trying to change. It'd be like trying to go out there and change your kicking technique one week to another. Yep. And you can't do it. So all learned behaviours over 15 years, that's a pattern. And to change that so minimally takes a lot of time. And in international cricket, you don't have that time. You play, travel, play, and it's not until everything's over and you get a week off that you still can't change it, but you've got to do it in game or in training. When you're in performance mode, you've still got to be trying to brush up on things because there's just not the amount of time. It's not like we don't have 3-month pre-seasons where you can just nail it down. So I probably wasted 2 years of my career there. One, not taking it seriously enough initially, and two, not being brave enough to say, no, I don't think that's right for my game because the flow-on effects are so big. So I've never been a good player off my pads. So then everyone wanted me to be a better player there, but then that would take away from my ultimate strength. So instead of finding a way to deal with my weakness, always chip away and trying to improve it slightly, but keep my strength as like a super strength. I was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and then that doesn't work because then you just become an average player because you don't have the ability to dominate, which is what you're ultimately trying to do. In terms of the 11 inside like an individual game, inside a team game, it fascinates me and it blows my mind that some blokes can walk off the field and go, that's not my fault. But you're the only person who got out.
That's what I was trying to allude to. Like, I find it. Like, I grew up playing cricket. I find it fascinating that sort of dynamic is within a team sport. Being a footballer now,
but guys walk off the ground and go, that is the most unlucky thing that's ever happened because they don't make mistakes.
Yeah,
and that blows my mind that you can have that much self-confidence in yourself that it never affects you. Your performance doesn't affect you because it's not your fault. Like, something extraordinary had to happen. And Steve Smith is a great exponent of that because he never carries any baggage into a next innings because he's probably the best player I've ever seen, best batter I've ever seen, all round batter. But his ability to be able to shake things off from a performance side of things is extraordinary. And his problem-solving ability from ball to ball, bowler to bowler, over to over, he changes his technique
it's incredible.
Mid-innings, depending on how they're trying to get him out. So he problem-solves quicker than anyone. And he's obviously highly skilled, but he carries no mental baggage into an innings because he's got a great ability to be able to go, right, that was one out of the box. Whereas I was constantly, like you said, catastrophizing, overanalyzing, overly critical at times when you go, sometimes you do just get a good ball.
Yeah.
And there's not much you can do about it. You played it perfect, your footwork was good. What more can you do? That's okay. Tick that off and move on. Keep trying to work on that. But some guys are just extraordinary at it, and it blows my mind that you can be so skilled and so mentally resilient in that regard to not let anything affect you game to game.
Yeah, it's a rare skill. You see it a little bit in footy circles as well. We have a couple of guys like Danger's a bit like that. There isn't any amount of mistakes.
No, and Jez is very similar.
Isaac Smith's a bit like that.
Yeah.
They're just kind of water off a duck's back.
Yeah.
And shock, they're all pretty good players.
Fairly handy. Yep.
But it's a fine balance because I sometimes think, right, well, maybe if I went easier on myself at different stages of my career, maybe I would have accelerated quicker. But I'm pretty sure that kind of self-critical nature was a key part of me hanging around as long as I did.
Yeah.
When I think about maybe early in my career when things weren't going great, where it would have been easier just to kind of go home and have my footy career back home with a sport I was much more comfortable in. I don't know if that kind of blasé attitude would have served me well then. Now, it may well have. I can't run the experiment, unfortunately, but I've definitely hedged much more that direction late in my career than I was early.
Coming in later, I'm the exact same. I was never allowing myself to make a minute mistake, which is just the way my personality is. And I think it's gotten me to the point where I'm now where I'm very comfortable in what I can produce, but I'm still not content with making those mistakes. I think that's really important for me.
I'm not saying that it's a bad thing that Steve Smith's...
No, it's just I find it incredible.
Yeah.
I find
I can't do it.
There's so many ways to be successful in any given sport, and there's a reason that there isn't any like one blueprint that every team and every athlete's using. It's like
do you think that these guys they're all highly skilled players that you talked about and I talked about, do you think that they analyse themselves behind closed doors as hard? Or you think that it's a bit more of a front for...
Yeah, so I think they probably do. I think Jez cares more than you might think from just from talking to him.
Yeah.
But like, so the one thing that I think I do quite well compared to most guys, I think I'm pretty good by foot. So you look at the game last week, I had an atrocious day by foot. So what I've gotten very good at is going, well, if I mess up the thing that I'm really good at, that's not alarming at all. That's actually quite good. If the reason I played poorly is because I did my usual strength poorly, it's like that's going to right itself. If I'm constantly making the same mistakes over and over, then it becomes a concern. And I think if Jez has a game where maybe things don't go his way, it's kind of like, well, like, who cares?
If you're still doing everything you can for the team,
so I can't even remember
don't execute.
round 1, but he comes out round 2, 25 and kick 6. Izzy's a bit like that, dangerous like that.
I think as well, when you've got a body of work like those players do, it'd be extremely difficult to sit back and go, oh, maybe I've lost it. You know, maybe I'm not that good. Like Steve Smith, like his career is incredible.
Yeah.
Like second only to like Don Bradman, who is like obviously an icon, and like Pat, Isaac, Jez, like these sort of players. So it'd be very difficult for them to sit back and go, oh, maybe I'm not that good. Because they are. The history shows they are very good players.
Yeah, I found at the end of my, probably the last 12 months, there'd be times when I'd walk out to bat and go, geez, these lights mustn't be working properly. Like, they mustn't have the lights up fully. Because you start to doubt everything. You go, geez, maybe my eyes are done. But and when you're not playing well, everything moves in fast forward. The bowlers feel like they're bowling quicker because your footwork's wrong. Yeah. Or your trigger movement might be half a second, a millisecond out. And then, like you said, you're defending 1 on 4 the other week or last week because one thing broke down up the ground. With your batting technique, if one part breaks down, everything, it's like, geez, that is in fast forward.
Wobbling and shaking.
Yeah, someone's bowling 130 Ks and it feels like Shoaib Akhtar's running in at you. But when
Zach has no idea who that is.
But when
cricket, I do.
Yeah, fastest bowler ever, Pakistan guy.
Yeah,
150 odd.
But when you're playing well, someone can bowl 150 at you, and it feels like medium pace. So, I started to question everything, going, geez, how about these lights? Geez, my eyes are gone. I'm rushed a bit, and then that flows onto everything as well, and you start to just have 1% of doubt in your game, and at international level, that's too much.
I forget exactly the expression. I don't know if I've said this to you. I'm a big fan of like little quotes and analogies and stuff. And I forget exactly how it was worded, but there's this idea that, self-confidence, which obviously is important, but looking at yourself in the mirror and telling yourself you're the best cricketer of all time means nothing if you haven't done the work. So it's like you're not who you tell yourself you are. You are who you've shown yourself to be. So this kind of gets to the importance of doing the work initially. It's like confidence is just confidence if you've done the work.
Yeah.
Confidence is just arrogance if you haven't. If you're just saying you're going to walk out and execute something that you've been taking the piss with in training, it's not going to happen. It's kind of this, American, we're all fantastic and we're all brilliant. And it's like, well, you're not if you don't do the work. You are who you've shown yourself to be. And I suspect someone like Steve Smith has probably done the work. So when things aren't...
The amount of work that he does is
So when things aren't
ridiculous.
going well, it's like, well, I've executed this a million times in training and the nets and everything, so I know I can fall back in it. If you imagine things going south when you know full well you've been cutting corners, like that's not a good place to be.
No.
So, yeah.
Very good. Very good. Now, we've talked a lot of cricket.
Yeah.
I know we're running short on time. We're just getting a nod from Troy.
The music's getting...
Yeah, the music's starting to come up. The curtains are coming down. I wouldn't mind talking a bit of footy with you.
Yeah.
Bit of footy. Obviously, this is a Geelong Cats pod, and very lucky to have you on. So, growing up, footy player, who was your favourite?
Gazza.
Senior?
Senior, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
So, here at GMHBA Stadium, my auntie used to bring me down on the train from Colac.
Beautiful.
The 8 o'clock train we used to get, the game started at 1:30 or so, so we'd be here early.
Yeah, perfect.
Watch the under-18s, the resis, and we'd sit on a little camping chair under the scoreboard where it used to be just the old school outer, standing room only. So that was a lot of fun. Every now and then we'd get a seat up in the Hickey stand, and that was like heaven. That was unbelievable, just to be able to sit up there outside, out of the rain. But Gary Senior, he was the idol, number 5 on my back. That's why I wear number 5.
Really?
Playing for Australia.
That's awesome.
Really? That's a sick story.
Brilliant. And what about current day? What about current day, Cat? Apart from obviously myself and Zach, who current day?
Selwood was just the way that he played, and I think anybody leading a team the way that he did for so long, I mean, it's incredible. But there was, and only knowing looking from the outside, the one thing as a leader you can't do is you can't ask somebody to do something that you're not prepared to do yourself, and I don't think he would ever be accused of that.
No.
And the career that he had, the way that he went about it, ruthless. That's what I loved about him. And then with the current side, obviously you two aside, it's pretty fun to watch when Jezza gets on a roll and he's burning off defenders and kicking them from 50.
I never got to see senior play, but I feel as though there's a slight essence of that when he's up and going. A lot of people are just
not sure he got that far away from goal though.
No, senior didn't. No, but like when Jez does what he does, it's very hard not to be in that moment, be like wow. Like even as a teammate, you're just like, how has he done that? Like when he snaps it from 65 metres away, like how is he doing that?
But there's no, if they're having a day out, there's no one that can really stop them. No. Because they're strong, tall, quick.
Yep.
If you've got someone who can run as good as he can, well, they're going to be playing up the ground generally, aren't they? Yep. And then if he goes deep in the forward line,
good luck.
Well, one of the Carlton boys, after, I forget which one of his goals last week, just turned to me and said, like, he just does whatever he wants, doesn't he? And I said, yeah, you can't really coach guys like that. You just have to let them go and do their thing. Like,
yeah, because you don't want to coach the flair.
Yeah.
Well, we might have to wrap it up, to be fair, because we actually have a meeting, and obviously coming off a loss, we probably should get to said meeting. So, absolute pleasure, mate.
Thanks for having me.
One of obviously our first ones, but really, really enjoyed it. We obviously got lost in the moment and just kept talking because I think we've only got 5 minutes to get downstairs, but that was absolutely brilliant, mate. So thank you again.
Anytime.
And good luck overseas. Hope it goes well. And
Thank
hopefully the little one slows down a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. I look forward to watching you boys from up in the social club with a few beers.
Perfect, mate. Sounds good. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Finchy.